As we all know, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. By 2030, Muslims will account for 26% of the total population, and by 2075, Islam will be the largest religion on earth, inshallah. But Muslims have been increasingly targeted because of their faith, and it has increased recently. This targeting of Muslims is called Islamophobia, and it is a global phenomenon. So, we created a criteria to identify which country is the most anti-Muslim country in the West. This is just our research, and Allah knows best. So stick around and find out. Keep in mind that Islamophobia is not rare in areas where Muslims are lower in number, but that is not the only contributing factor. Startlingly, the phenomenon is more prevailing in regions where domestic politics or political bargaining for creating coalitions occur. Fortunately, different organizations, such as the United Nations, recognize the threat it poses to humanity and the collective good in the world. To draw attention to its severity, a resolution was passed that was introduced by Imran Khan, Prime Minister of Pakistan, setting March 15th as the International Day to Combat Islamophobia. In addition, the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation has stepped up with an observatory to monitor Islamophobic activities around the globe. Just in time, too. The severity of Islamophobia is more perplexing than initially thought, so we'll let you know how we came to this conclusion. Key Islamophobia indicators or criteria. Every year, the OIC provides periodic reporting against 6 basic metrics to provide insight in the global phenomenon known as Islamophobia. And the latest report has some eye-opening statistics and facts, but let's see what the metrics that form the annual report. Discrimination. Discriminations is the act of making unjustified distinctions between people based on groups and classes. It is based on race, gender, age, religion, or sexual orientation, among many other things. This also involves restricting numbers of one group from opportunities or privileges that are available to members of another group. Policy. A policy is a statement of intent and is implemented as a procedure or protocol. Policies might be taken by the government, public sector organizations and groups, as well as individuals. Presidential executive orders, corporate privacy policies, and parliamentary rules of order are all examples of policy. Policy differs from rules or law simply because the law can compel or prohibit behaviors. In contrast, policy merely guides actions towards those that are most likely to achieve the desired result. Identity politics. Identity politics, such as far right, refers to the idea that political stands are grounded in ethnicity, race, or religion rather than on broader policies. Far-right policies are politics further than the standard political right within the left-right political spectrum, particularly in terms of being anti-communist, authoritarian, ultranationalist, and having nativist ideologies and tendencies. Verbal and physical assault. Verbal assault could be excessive taunting or teasing, bullying, or other verbal harassment. It could even be a bomb threat directed at a school building, other school property, or a school event. Physical assault, however, means intentionally causing or attempting to cause physical harm to another through force or violence. Hate speech and online hate. Hate speech is any form of expression through which speakers intend to vilify, humiliate, or incite hatred against a group or a class of people based on race, religion, skin color, sexual identity, gender identity, ethnicity, disability, or national origin. Online hate speech is simply defined as a type of speech that takes place online or through social media to attack a person or a group based on their race, religion, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, disability, or gender. Defamation of veil, hijab, and burqa. Defamation means making false or unprivileged statements or representations about an individual or an identifiable group of individuals that harm the reputation of the person or the identifiable group by demeaning them. Meanwhile, the veil, hijab, and burqa are headdresses, covering, or scarves that Muslim women use, which are in keeping with the regulations and faith within the Islamic teaching concerning modesty. With that, let us move on to know which is the most Islamophobic country in the world. But before that, please understand that these key indicators are important because these distinguish incidents and events that took place around the world and help in understanding the severe infliction taking place globally. The most Islamophobic country in the West. Islam is a religion that is not bound to a race, creed, or region of the world. That makes it difficult to name one Western country, whereas, fairly speaking, the occurrences are global. Using the indicators, we have come up with the top 4. Canada. In at 4 on the list of the most Islamophobic country in the West is Canada. 1 in every 20 Canadians is a Muslim, and Islam is the second largest religion with a population of about 1.8 million. Facts about Islamophobia in Canada have actually been relieving, as good things have been recorded that have happened in Canada over the past 5 years. The Canadian government keeps showing friendly gestures towards Islam while taking significant measures to protect the Muslim population living in the country. Interfaith relations in Canada are also exemplary, where groups of people from different religious backgrounds extend support to each other. The authorities also exercise appropriate actions against extreme far-right groups and perpetrators of crimes done based on religion or faith. Positive views about Islam and promotion of tolerance have been pretty much reflected in statements made by Canadian leaders and prominent figures. However, more needs to be done. Aggression against Canadian Muslims accelerated as the number of anti-Muslim attacks and hate crimes ballooned. Incidents showed a dramatic increase of more than threefold. Some incidents worth mentioning, like a racist attack against 2 Muslims in Kingston. A Muslim mother and daughter were threatened with Islamophobic slurs and later to kill in Hamilton, Ontario. A Muslim family was hit by a car on Hyde Park Road, Ontario. A Muslim man was stabbed and had his beard cut by assailants as they yelled about his religious clothing in Saskatoon. A Muslim mother and daughter were assaulted in a mall parking lot in Edmonton. A Muslim woman with a hijab was attacked at the Southgate LRT station, also in Edmonton. A man with knife attacks 2 women wearing hijab, still in Edmonton, etc. Another trend that has brought Canada to this list was the growing number of attacks against mosques and Islamic Center, which is quite a phenomenon, since such a trend was uncommon in Canada in the past. Some incidents were cited, such as vandalism targeting a mosque in Conception Bay South, a shooting at Montreal Mosque, a swastika painted on Edmonton Mosque, multiple instances of anti-Muslim graffiti found in central Newton, Scarborough Mosque was broken into and vandalized, and so on. Nevertheless, despite the mounting number of Islamophobia incidents in Canada, the continued efforts taken by the Canadian government to tackle the issue are commendable. France. Third on our list of the most Islamophobic Western country in the world is France. Islamophobia in France developed à toute vitesse last year. It started on 2nd September 2020 when the French magazine Charlie Hebdo launched another reckless provocation by republishing cartoons about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The same cartoon had in the past triggered condemnation and the eventual attack and killings in Paris in January 2015. The republishing of the cartoon coincides with the trial of persons accused as accomplices in the 2015 attacks that killed 11 staff members of the magazine. The trial opened to the public on that day, and proceedings continued till 10th November 2020. The republishing of the offensive cartoons drew renewed condemnation in France and beyond. However, other groups supporting the republishing of the cartoons, viewing these through the classical lens of freedom of expression and freedom of the press. On 9th December 2020, a draft bill was examined at the French National Assembly. The bill proposed 57 articles designed to outlaw the activities defined as Islamist separatism and undermining the values of the Republic. It seeks to reduce homeschooling by making school compulsory for children after 3 years old. Will be an offense to pressure civil servants and public service providers to deviate from France's secular values in the name of ideology or religious extremism. Online postings disseminating personal details of persons to endanger their lives will be a punishable offense. Oversight of religious associations and mosques would also require to declare foreign funding, and all association requesting funds should sign a charter of secularism. Crack down on any behavior that violates the dignity of people, especially women. The law also strengthens the state's arsenal against forced marriages and polygamy. On the 23rd of July 2021, the controversial bill against separatists was finally adopted by a large minority. Some French lawmakers, especially leftist Jean-Luc Mélenchon, tried to block and express strong criticism against the bill. The government said that the legislation was needed to bolster France's secular system and ensure the text has a general scope and does not target one religion. Other critics said that the bill breaches religious freedom and unfairly targets Muslims, and fear that the French government will pass more Islamophobic legislation. The bill has been officially renamed as Bill Upholding Republican Principles. Purposes articles on the neutrality of public services, the protection of civil servants, online hatred, and dissemination of personal details, reducing homeschooling, oversight of religious associations and mosques, and transparency of their funding, or fighting against virginity certificates, forced marriages, and polygamy. Furthermore, the law states that organizations seeking public funds will have to sign a Republican contract and abide by its conditions. Since then, Islamophobia in France has been soaring high, bringing the country to the list of hotspots of Islamophobia. United States. Second on our list of the most Islamophobic country in the West is the United States. Anyone surprised? The US has always been at the top list of Islamophobia hotspots, and such a worrisome trend does not seem cooling down anytime soon. Why? Based on the empirics gathered over the last few years, it would seem that the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001 had somehow made many Americans see Islam today as a serious threat to their national security. To aggravate things more, the rise of the ISIS phenomenon a few years back made the situation even worse, and for many Americans, government, parliament, and ordinary people, Islam has been portrayed as a religion of intrinsic violence, whose disciples trended to spread harm to the followers of other religion. The US and many other countries, Islam has even been considered an alien religion prone to bloodshed, a stigma that triggers intolerant attitudes from the majority population. This negative stereotyping eventually ended up in negative sentiments, dread, or hatred of Islam that includes multi-form of discrimination, brought to light by the exclusion of Muslims from economic, social, and public life. Together, all these things are the essential ingredients of Islamophobia in Western countries, including in the US, which unfortunately continues to this day. In support of such a conclusion, a report published by Pew Research Center, published in September 2021, is worthy of particular attention. The report found that in the 20 years since September 11, Republicans had increasingly come to view Islam as more likely than any other religion to encourage violence among believers. According to the research, Muslims had continued to face bias and discrimination in the US 2 decades after 9/11, and those negative biases had become increasingly partisan. As of 2021, 7 in 10 Republicans associated Islam with violence, while only 1/3 of Democrats thought the same way. They were still more likely to think of Islam as encouraging violence earlier than in early 2002. In a September 2001 survey, 28% of adults said they had grown more suspicious of people of Middle Eastern descent. That grew to 36% less than a year later. Republicans, in particular, increasingly came to associate Muslims and Islam with violence. In 2002, just a quarter of Americans, including 32% of Republicans and 23% of Democrats, said Islam was more likely than any other religion to encourage violence among its believers, about twice as many 51% said it was not. However, within the next few years, most Republicans in GOP said Islam was more likely than other religions to encourage violence. 72% of Republicans expressed this view, according to an August 2021 survey. Democrats consistently had been far less likely than Republicans to ascend with violence. In the latest survey, 32% of Democrats said this. Still, Democrats were somewhat more likely to say this today than they have been in recent years. In 2019, 28% of Democrats said Islam was more likely than other religions to encourage violence among its believers than other religions. This is a terrible fact. Unfortunately, while making sense of the continuously high level of Islamophobia in the US today. United Kingdom. First in our list of the most Islamophobic country in the Western world is the United Kingdom, with an increasing number of attacks on mosques and Islamic centers and Muslim individuals. The population of about 3.9 million has been struggling with this global endemic unceasingly. Islamophobia in the United Kingdom has been at a constant high for the past 5 years, and the contributing factor identified to such a worrisome trend was the fast-growing far-right influence in the country, soon after the bold inspiration brought by the victory of the far right in the United States at the end of 2016. There's no secret that far-right movements in the UK have been focusing mainly on opposing Islam, in addition to their long struggle against British attachments to the European Union. As a result, Islamophobia in the UK keeps going high, manifested at high levels from government offices to parliament, and continued until frequent incidents on the streets. Muslims, especially migrants and refugees, were easy targets. An instance worth mentioning was the case of thousands of Afghans housed temporarily in British hotels following the recent crisis in Afghanistan. They were continuously harassed by far-right groups who drew on Islamophobic narratives to whip up hate against the refugees. Britain First, one of the most notorious and prominent groups involved in the campaign, had been reported to have many unsolicited visits to hotels housing refugees across England in just a few weeks. Right-wing extremism monitors had observed that the resettlement schemes for Afghans had become a focal point for many far-right groups, since the arrival of the refugees had led to the far-right reviving and refining similar attacks used during the Syria crisis. The far-right was using ideas rooted in Islamophobia, such as the Muslim takeover of Europe, or framing refugees as potential terrorists or sex offenders to incite hatred against them. So there it is, guys. The most Islamophobic country in the world. Allah knows best. Be sure to like this video. Check out our other videos and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this.